When Ecuador's president, Rafael Correa, was voted into power in 2007, his government wanted to reconfigure the media landscape there. It passed a communications law written to diminish the power of private media, traditionally owned by the right-wing business class, which opposes leftist leaders like Correa, and to increase the space for public and community broadcasting. When the global news media have covered this story, which is not often, they have highlighted Correa's public attacks on private media and accused him of authoritarianism. But for many Ecuadorians, that image doesn't tell the full story. They see the private media representing the country's privileged elite, and many of those who voted Correa in twice now point to the stories of this government that have gone uncovered: the social policies, free health care, education, historic rises in pensions, and corresponding drops in poverty. They say the media law has leveled an uneven playing field, that it lays the groundwork for Ecuador's first public broadcasting system, one that includes voices that privately owned mainstream news media have traditionally left out. The Listening Post's Marcela Pizarro now from Quito, 3 years after the media law was passed, on the government's multifaceted media strategy and its impact on society.
Switch on the TV in Ecuador on a Saturday morning. Tune into Enlace Ciudadano, Citizens Link, brought to you by the nation's president cum presenter, Rafael Correa. Correa spends his weekends traveling to the country's most remote towns for a 4-hour political roadshow, doing what he says the mainstream media fails to, reporting on his government's achievements. Though it may look kitsch, it's a masterstroke in political communications.
Ya, como dije antes, él explica todo su trabajo que ha hecho, ¿no?
Ha habido una revolución, o sea, nada que ver con el país que encontramos.
A ningún gobierno le ha convenido dar reeducación a su pueblo y peor salud. ¿Para qué? Para mantenernos en la ignorancia. Los medios de comunicación siempre han sido oposición y siempre han sido poder en el país. Cuando han querido votar un presidente, han votado. Así de fácil.
Hay quien dice que es un espacio propagandístico y sí.
Some would call it propaganda. That's because it is. It's a space for self-promotion. It's a totally different communication strategy from other Ecuadorian presidents, who always used to go through spokesmen.
Cómo hay periodistas que en vez de periodistas son buitres, buscando carroña, ¿no? Buscando cómo hacer daño.
Este gobierno es un gobierno...
This government is directed by PR people, and the rationale behind their communication strategy comes from advertising. They have set up a propaganda system, and the president fits perfectly well within this scheme. He has consolidated himself as the man who owns the narrative.
Capacidad de expresarse.
Rafael Correa, para bien o para mal, les guste o no les guste.
Like it or not, Rafael Correa is a phenomenon in the field of communication. He succeeded in permeating the national consciousness. If he wasn't charismatic, didactic, he may have bored everyone, and it wouldn't have worked. It's happened with leaders before. The only problem is that in this system, the strategy relies too heavily on him and no one else.
La ausencia de él podría agotarse esa forma de comunicar.
The format may seem familiar. Remember Venezuelan President Hugo Chávez's 6-hour TV marathons? Like Chávez, Correa has waged an open battle with the country's right-wing private media.
Cuánta irresponsabilidad estos politiqueros frustrados disfrazados de periodistas.
When it comes to media reform, Ecuador has also looked south to Argentina for inspiration. During her time in power, Cristina Kirchner pushed through a law that aimed to demonopolize the media, to dilute the power of big private networks. In 2013, Ecuador passed its own communications law, La Ley Orgánica de la Comunicación, whose key provisions were for a media watchdog to regulate newspaper and TV content, and splicing the media market into 3 equal parts: private, state, and community-controlled.
One of the great struggles of the Ecuadorian people, indigenous people, Afro-Ecuadorians, students, journalists in general, has been the issue of democratizing the media. So one of the great successes here is that this law calls for equity in the market. Why is this important? Because in Ecuador there was always a monopoly on truth. The narrative always came from just one type of media.
Digamos, un paisaje mediático, ya que lo dices.
Private media used to dominate the landscape. Broadcasting was divided unequally. 92 to 93% of it belonged to private mass media. We had no public media, and the few public outlets that did exist just disappeared due to lack of funds. And community outlets didn't even amount to 1%.
Denominados comunitarios no llegaban al 1%.
En este país nacieron primero los medios privados.
In this country and all over Latin America, private media preceded public media. It's not like European countries where public media came first. Here, private media have always been able to control public opinion, and they have always echoed the interests of media owners. This has also prevented the development of other forms of media.
Pidieron el desarrollo de nuevos medios.
The government has built its own media apparatus. To level out private media dominance, it now runs 5 TV channels, 4 radio stations, 2 newspapers and 4 magazines. And this year, community and indigenous media were invited to tender for licenses on over 1,400 frequencies. A media policy milestone for many, although some skeptics say outlets critical of the government are unlikely to be awarded licenses. The other part of the law that's come under fire is the creation of the media watchdog Supercom, which has the power to impose fines and order media to issue public apologies on output it deems offensive.
La creación, el establecimiento de una superintendencia.
Supercom is controlled directly by the President of the Republic, by the executive branch, so it will always rule in favor of the state. After the law was passed, media outlets got scared. Journalists are self-censoring. They know their outlets could face fines, so they keep quiet or avoid subjects that might anger the government.
Especialmente espinosos para el gobierno.
Martín Pallares was a journalist at El Comercio, one of the country's biggest right-wing dailies. He was fired last year for his outspoken tweets against the president. He says it's because the paper felt the heat from Supercom. That paper wasn't the only one. Javier Bonilla, pen name Bonil, is well known for his cartoons that take potshots at the government. Bonil and his paper El Universo, which has a history of expensive run-ins with Correa, most recently faced a $180,000 fine, and the paper was ordered to publish a correction on a cartoon deemed racist by the watchdog.
Vaya a la superintendencia y yo me creé un...
I was summoned to Supercom, so I went there with 2 pencils. A giant fake one, made of rubber, and a normal one. The sanction was to correct the cartoon, right? Why? The argument was that the cartoon lied. But in cartoons, what we do is to exaggerate certain traits. The way to empower people, to democratize speech, is not by silencing others. And sadly, that's what's happening. Look at Argentina, Ecuador, Venezuela, Nicaragua. I mean, who is telling the truth? Is it just those who can make themselves heard?
For the past 10 years, countries around this region, countries like Ecuador, Venezuela, Bolivia, Argentina, have been trying to redraw their media maps. Venezuela's President Hugo Chavez, Bolivia's Evo Morales, the Kirchners from Argentina, and Rafael Correa in Ecuador have all fought very public battles against the private media. They've been called authoritarian, pariahs of press freedom by some. Others say they're trying to democratize the right to speech for everyone.
These Latin American left-wing governments face an uncertain future, and so too does the media landscape they'd started to reshape. In Argentina, the new right-wing president, Mauricio Macri, has vowed to scrap Kirchner's media reform law. In Venezuela, socialism has lost its telegenic champion. Chavez is dead, and his Bolivarian revolution is no longer being televised. Rafael Correa, in his final year as president, would hope that his legacy, the media reforms he led, might better stand the test of time.
In Ecuador's polarized media landscape, community media outlets that operate outside the private media space can offer a real alternative to the mainstream. Here are some of them. The so-called radio schools have been covering stories outside of Quito in the Chimborazo province ever since 1962. They matter because they give indigenous communities platforms to have their voices heard. They broadcast in Spanish, Quechua, and other indigenous languages. A series of online sites has emerged from Quito in the past few years, offering debate and investigative journalism, often critical of the government. They include Focus, Mil Hojas, Plan V, and the Cuatro Pelagatos, which was founded by a group of journalists, including Martín Payares, who contributed to our piece. They also recently created a satirical tool, a digital app called Mashi Machine, that allows President Correa's speeches to be jumbled up so that mischievous users can mess with his message and then share their work on social media. Senor Correa is probably not amused.